Of course, the crowd wants Reed to go for it. Wouldn't be surprised if he did on 4th down and 1.
So, anyways, with that, time's yours.
Welcome to 4th and 1. I'm Tod Palmer, joined by Nick Jacobs. And listen, a win is a win in the NFL, right? I mean, the Chiefs, they did come out of the bye and improved to, Andy Reid's now 21-3 coming out of bye games. They beat the Titans 20-17 in overtime. But a couple of weeks ago after they beat San Francisco, we talked about wanting to see consistency from this group. That you did not see on Sunday Night Football, especially going against a team that had its backup quarterback, a rookie, and Malik Willis in there. I guess, Nick, I want to start with, what is your level of concern about this Chiefs team and whether they're a legitimate Super Bowl contender this year?
I'd say the biggest thing is they have a pattern right now. I was talking to sports director KSHB's Mick Schaefer about it. If you look at their season and their schedule, they beat Arizona by 40, had a struggle game against the Chargers, then had an unexpected loss and a struggle of a game against the Colts. Then they come back with a vengeance. Big blowout win against the Bucs. I know the final score didn't indicate it as much as it was, but they hung 40 again, like they did in week 1. Then they had struggle. Two games were struggle, and then they hit again with the 49ers game that they ended up winning. Buffalo was one of those, and you expect that to be a tight, close game. And then they've started the pattern. The pattern starts all over again every 3 games, to where the 49ers dominant performance, Titans was a physical struggle, and then now the question becomes with the Jaguars. This is where they can either break the trend that they've had as a team to where they go with another dominant performance or play up to the level they're capable of, or is it a grinded out type of football game? But it seems like they have this pattern where they did, like you said, they just can't find a consistency about all 3 phases of their football team.
Well, if there's any good news, that means that they'll struggle against the Jaguars and then absolutely dominate the Chargers the next week. So if the pattern holds, that would at least be a good thing as far as the division and their hopes of making the playoffs. But what needs to change, man? Because, I know that especially in the first half, they get up 200 yards rushing, and people are talking about, oh man, the defense struggled against Derrick Henry and company. But I mean, they had 3 big plays. They did a poor job on the screen to the tight end, who I don't think anybody had ever heard of before the game. And they gave up a couple runs, 56 yards and 24 yards to Derrick Henry. But outside of that, I thought the defense played really, really well. They only gave up 22 yards on 27 plays in the second half and only 1 first down. It's hard for me to pin, this on the defense. And I mean, yeah, you'd like to eliminate a couple of the explosive plays there, especially in the first half. But on balance, if you're an NFL defense and you give up 17 in a game, I think you've done your job. So do you agree with that assessment? And if so, what does the offense need to fix to get going?
From a defensive perspective with the Chiefs, a part of it right now is I remind myself that Malik Willis was a quarterback, and the Titans don't have wide receivers. No, that's a big reality. They don't have wide receivers. So, I mean, that offense was a very one-dimensional offense with both Derrick Henry and Hillard in their style of run game. Hillard being more the change of pace, finesse back, while Henry being the battering ram power style that he has about him and about his game of wearing down the defense for 4 quarters. So they knew what they had. They knew what they had to do and who they were going to have to potentially go after or attack to be able to get the ball back to their offense as much as possible. So, I mean, in terms, they faced an inferior quarterback, and that doesn't mean Malik Willis can't be good down the road. There are some encouraging signs there I think the Titans are going to be really happy about and probably say, hey, if we get some receivers for this guy, give him a lot of snaps, a lot of reps, a lot of experience, he could be our version of Lamar Jackson with, somewhat more accurate ability, probably in some ways a little bit better passer than Lamar is a lot of the time. So I think there's a lot of promise in what Willis can be for him. but that moment was too big for him, especially there at the end. And that poor guy was overwhelmed. And when you don't have good receivers to throw to, and the offense isn't really trying to tailor towards what you're capable of in that moment, they put too much on him. And I think there was a lot of errors that Mike Vrabel and the coaching staff made, and a lot of blunders that helped get the Chiefs this win. And then there's a guy named Patrick Mahomes that decided that enough was enough. And hey, if we're all not going to take our part in the group project, I'll handle it myself on that final drive in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I agree on Malik Willis. You saw his ability to extend plays, be a little bit slippery, make plays with his legs. Even on the sacks late, I mean, he did a good job of staying alive. Just nobody ever came open for him to throw to. But I think he has a chance to be a good player. I was shocked. I mean, as successful as Henry was at times, they only got him 17 carries. Like there were times, I mean, it seemed like if they got stopped on first down, they just kind of abandoned the run, which I thought was the Chiefs' advantage, because I thought it was as likely if they would have ran it the second time, they would have found themselves in 3rd and 2 anyway, if they would have just kept feeding Henry the ball. But, it worked out in the end for the Chiefs. But which is a bigger concern for you as far as that offense is concerned? The wide receivers and the fact that outside of Juju Smith-Schuster, you're still not – I thought McCole Hardman had a good game too, but outside of those two guys, like Marquez Valdez-Scantling disappeared, against the Titans. And that's not the first game we've said that about him. Sky Moore still hasn't found a role in the offense. And on a night like last night where Travis Kelce certainly had some bright spots, but he certainly didn't have a vintage Travis Kelce performance, it really bogged down the offense. So is that a bigger concern, or is it the offensive line still not being able to do what it needs to establish the run and still being pretty leaky in pass protection?
It's a domino effect with everything, and it all comes together and encompasses each little bit of it. If I'm having to put them and stack them in a checklist order, the first thing is Patrick Mahomes and that passing offense go as the offensive tackles do. What Orlando Brown and Andrew Wiley are able to do and how comfortable they're able to make Patrick back in that pocket and how much time he feels he has, how many hits he takes, determines how long he's going to stay in the pocket before he bails out. And that's just who Patrick Mahomes has been with the tackle play he's had over the years, and that's just who he's going to be. And so, like, there was a time in the fourth quarter, I'll bring this example up, but the fourth quarter, McCole Hardman's streaking across wide open, for maybe the game-winning touchdown. Mahomes ended up running on that, but that was a big play that people kept pointing to. And I think that was an effect over time of some of the hits he was taking and the way he was feeling in that pocket about why he bailed the way he did, or read the things the way that he did with coverage and where he was getting his reads from on that play. So did he miss that guy? Yes. And people will point to that and say he's got to do that. But none of us actually know what his progression is that he's going through on the play, in that moment. Only the Chiefs offense knows 100%. But what I'm getting at in the bigger picture of it is the offensive tackles determine each and every week what Mahomes is going to, how efficient are they going to be when they have good performances, when they chip, when they slow guys down and occasionally take people out of routes, or initially early on, they find routine success. Another part of it is, and what the Titans were going after, is they were taking Travis Kelce out of his game. They know that the offense runs through Travis Kelce, so they were sometimes they would drop somebody in to kind of help double up in a way, or kind of get physical with Kelce, just like the Patriots have done over the years, and Vrabel continues to copy, and they take Kelce out of his game and make him upset. So he's got to work through it. Mahomes has got to work through it. But when things fall apart, they know that Travis is going to be the guy that Patrick is going to go to. Juju Smith-Schuster is upping the ante and becoming a part of that. And that's where this team has at least another piece of the puzzle. But what they're still missing, and what you're talking about, is the Chiefs in the offseason, what they're going to have to decide no matter what is, do they want to improve the tackle play on the roster, or do they want a speed receiver to replace Tyreek Hill and what they've lost with him? Because they were hoping Valdez-Scantling could do that, or McCole Hardman could do that, and they necessarily haven't been able to take over that mantle. And like you said, with the other thing with Sky Moore's lost right now. Like, you can look at the way he's running routes. It's not there in the way that he feels comfortable in this offense right now. And we'll see where Kadarius Toney's at long term, but it's still a work in progress with their passing offense, with what they have available and what they can beat versus zone and man coverage. And then the final point, to be long-winded here, in the running game, that part right there, in my opinion, part of it is the interior push. They weren't going to be able to get it against that front, especially Jeffrey Simmons, because he's a rock star. So you're going to have to double him every play just to have a chance. And you were going to have to double the defensive tackles all night and try to run between the tackles if you wanted to get something done effectively. And you were going to have to use McKinnon and Pacheco to probably do that, to give you what you needed. Pacheco from a power run, McKinnon from more of a finesse explosion, hit the hole quickly type. And that was going to be how they were going to have to go about it. But there just isn't the Kareem Hunt or Jamal Charles style of runner in that group, that it just doesn't matter. You know, that they can find a way to erase the angles, erase the blocking issues. They just don't have that on the roster. So, I mean, when you look at it at all different levels, that's what that ends up turning into, to answer the question to the best that I can.
Jamal Charles, by the way, came into the locker room and was visiting with the other 25 yesterday after the game. I was tempted to ask him if he, thought he could still play now that he's had a couple years off to rest and recuperate, because he still looked pretty good. I'm sure he was there because Kimball Anders was inducted into the Hall of Fame. But
yeah, I think it was like an alumni weekend, wasn't it, to kind of get all the guys back there?
Yeah, I think they're trying to incorporate that together so that they can get, all the guys on the same page, and keep building that alumni base. But no, it was good to run into Jamal Charles. Several of us who recognized him lit up, the minute he walked into that locker room. But yeah, I mean, look, none of these issues are new, right? Like, I mean, we knew going into the season that, and we've known as the season's gone along that the tackles struggle. We've known that, the running backs are limited in terms of their ability to, depending on the running back to see the hole, to make the right read and make the right cut, to set up blocks well, to run through or out of blocks, things like that. I mean, they're just, I don't think that those things get fixed. So I guess my question would be, are the Chiefs still a Super Bowl contender in your mind, or do you think that there's a pretty clear gap still between, say, the Buffalo Bills of the world, and maybe, I don't know, maybe the Eagles, if you want to put them up there, I mean, or do you think that these are all things that the Chiefs can figure out, and by the time they get to December and January, be where they need to be?
The way I can say this right now is I still think they're a work in progress. I don't think they know what they are, and I don't think they've found that happy medium right now. And the question is, can they find that happy medium by the time they get to the playoffs, or is it just kind of an inconsistent work in progress for this season? Because they've got enough of a sample size for having almost been through, eight games at this point to kind of know who they are, what their identity is, what they can and can't do, and what they can be, what they can be successful at. And so, I mean, they still struggle with that consistency, like we've talked about. They just don't know. They don't have something that no matter what happens, no matter what defense throws at them, they can lean on that one thing. Back in the day, that used to be, when Kareem Hunt was there in 2018, if something wasn't going right, they at least had options at all times. They either had Kelsey, Tyreek, or Kareem when the offense was at its peak to be able to run through to make that happen. And they just don't. They're still trying to find that second and third player that they can player, whatever you want to call it, that they can funnel to at times when Kelsey gets taken away.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Kadarius Toney is used. I was not surprised at all that Andy Reid ran the first play to him on a little bubble screen. He ended up with 2 catches for 12 yards. There was a lot made of his blocking. as well. I think that he can be an asset as the season moves along. I mean, it's encouraging that they were able to get him in, that he was able to have an impact in only 9 or 10 snaps. We'll see what they do with the punt returner going forward. I mean, last night it was McCole Hardman Jr. that took over that role for Sky Moore. But I certainly think that Kadarius Toney can play a role moving forward, and this may be the change of scenery he needs to unlock some of that potential. But I think it's too early to make any definitive statements about what he can or can't be. You know what I mean? I don't think it hurts to add one more weapon to that offense, though, and to give them one more toy to play with as they try to figure things out. The bigger issue for me is the offensive line, because I don't. They stood pat. They didn't go out and get a lineman. I'm not even sure that one was necessarily available. I mean, Lucas Niang's practice window is open. I mean, do you have any hope that him coming back can help turn things around? Or because I do think that we talk about the tackles too, but we've seen, Trey Smith, whether it's the ankle injury and the pec injury that he's had, in these first couple of months of the season, he's had struggles that we aren't accustomed to see him having, or at least weren't in his rookie season. Same with Creed Humphrey early. Joe Thuney has not played at an all-pro level like he had in New England when they brought him in. So it's hard for me to see what the solution up front is more than it is to see what the solution among the wide receivers is.
Yeah, I mean, from an offensive line perspective, I don't think you're getting the solution this year. Like, you're just having to grit through it and chip when you have to in the passing offense and try to work around it. Because I think, for me, Orlando Brown doesn't look like a guy that's 100%. He doesn't look 100% to me. And even after losing weight, I was kind of hoping that would help him with some of his flexibility. And he seems to be struggling with that more so than I thought he would be. Joe Thuney was never going to be a power run blocking guard. He's a Pro Bowl guard that could potentially play tackle, and he may have to in a pinch if something happens. You're crossing your fingers, nothing does with the offensive line you got right now. But if it does, you're going to need him to go do that immediately. I mean, Creed's still doing a solid job. Right. Trey, ever since that ankle injury, hasn't been the same player. And my assumption is I don't think he's 100% either. I don't care. I personally don't care what's on injury reports. Some players may have something that they don't tell anybody about. That happens. They just want to grit through it. So that's happened with guys I've talked to over the years. So I mean, you can tell on tape when a player has a certain baseline and they're not playing up to it. Something's amiss. You just don't know what, and you typically don't find out till the year's over with. So that's just how that works out. And then Wiley's doing the best he can. In all honesty, Wiley could play guard if needed, and I think he's a better guard than he is tackle. We've talked about on here before. But with Niang, I mean, with that injury, that's a risky injury for an offensive lineman when they come back from. Like, you gotta really make sure that that's 100% whenever they come back, because some of the studies that have been done don't show a ton of promise for long-term, length of career. If that's not back to 100%, and it could take up. I know from some of the research I've seen from looking at it, for some players they can take up to years. Athletes, let me say athletes. Some athletes, they can take up to a year before they feel like they're fully back to 100%. So I mean, like, that's you would love to see Niang be a part of it and be able to kind of help give this offense a jolt to where they're only having to help to chip on one side or try to help alleviate on one part of it. But as of right now, I'm just mentally preparing for. There's going to be some inconsistencies, and if there's not a dominant front four, they have a good shot. And depending on what man or zone coverage they play, it could be hit or miss. But I don't think this Chiefs team, as of right now, has something that they can lean on when things aren't going right to kind of get them through it. If you look at Sunday night, I mean, it took to that final drive in the fourth quarter for Pat to say, all right, I've done the group project long enough. This needs to get done. It needs to get done right. I'm going to do it myself, and this is how it's going to be. And I just don't think there's enough guys on that roster offensively right now that have that same mentality. And this is something Mick Schaefer has said at KSHB, our sports director. Patrick is the smartest player on the field. he sees everything. He sees coverages. He sees penalties for both sides, more so than probably the refs. And this is me quoting Mick, so I want to give him recognition on that. And each week that I watch it, I agree with him more and more. Like, Pat sees everything. He anticipates everything. It's just I just don't think there's enough people on that roster that are on that same wavelength that aren't Travis Kelce, and Juju's doing his best to get up there. And I think that's kind of a hindrance for where this offense can be.
I think Justin Watson, showed some signs, certainly with that back shoulder catch, a really incredible catch he made down the sideline. You've seen signs that some other guys are getting on that page, but just not consistently enough. But I mean, I would say that's what they have to hang their hat on, right? Is Patrick Mahomes' will to win, because, I wrote about it yesterday at kshb.com. That dude ran a 4.8 Like, he is, slower than every linebacker, every safety, and every cornerback out there in the NFL. Like, I don't, for the most part. But when his team needs him to get 17 yards on a third down late in the fourth quarter to keep a drive alive, he gets 18, 19, 20, when he needs to okey doke Jeffrey Simmons, to get the angle and get into the end zone on another third down to score the touchdown, he's able to do it, to your point. I mean, he sees everything, and he's able to get the angle to get to the front pylon on the 2-point conversion and give his team a chance to win. I think that's the one thing that the Chiefs have that can set them apart. If Patrick Mahomes is going to keep working with those guys that he has, whether they're good enough to win a Super Bowl, we'll find out. But I think it's Patrick Mahomes, his football IQ, and just that dog that he has inside him to go out and compete every play to the end. That's all that the Chiefs have to hang their hats on, that they can separate themselves with right now.
And my concern with that is, how long do you keep making him be that guy and not have other like-minded people like that before it starts burning them out? Like that.
How long does the contract last?
That's my bigger concern long term, is like him and Kelce have that 100%, and I'm not going to knock that. And Chris Jones, when he flips it on, Chris Jones is that guy too. But
I think Juju has it.
And he might. But I'm saying, like, you need to surround that offense with more guys that are like that, and it just are able to lock in like that. Because I think that's where the ebbs and flows come from. Is like, and it's funny, whether it's Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes, whoever, it always seems like this offense over the past decade, it's always looking around, and be like, hey, who wants to be the fire starter this game? And then and with Mahomes, you didn't have to worry about that as much. But there's times where he needs somebody to be able to lean on too. He needs somebody to pick him up, because he's not going his way either. And like, I just kind of wonder sometimes long term, like, hey, like, don't put him in a spot to where like this becomes a problem down the road.
Yeah, I think up front, ultimately it needs to be Creed Humphrey. But I think he's probably a little bit deferential to Orlando Brown Jr. and Joe Thuney, because as we know, in the NFL, the guys inside that locker room often define who should be the leader and things like that by who's pulling down the biggest contract. And it's Brown and it's Thuney. And I don't know that you see those guys being, the fire starter, kind of like you said up front. I think ultimately it's going to have to be Creed. I think Trey's capable of doing it too. I mean, certainly we've seen him. He's capable, but I think those guys they're going to have to continue building toward that. And then like you said, they're going to have to keep building more guys around them. We'll see if they can get it done. And hopefully Travis Kelce has 5 or 6 more productive years in him, because they may need it the way things are going.
Yeah, and that's the bigger thing the Chiefs are having to figure out with the roster building is, I think this is what they have to do their soul searching on, evaluating over these final handful of games before a hopeful playoff run, is who on this roster buys in at that level, who at this roster brings it, and who do we kind of need to kind of find other guys to kind of fill in those roles to where It's not just everybody waiting on Pat to decide that he's going to make a play, or Kelsey to Mahomes connection to make that play. Because when Kelsey threw his helmet on TV, that was frustration because he wants to be great and help Pat. Like, that's what that was. That wasn't about just him. Like, then Kelsey has that drive. Pat has that drive. There's some guys on the roster that have that drive. They just need more of it, and they need it more consistently if they want to be the Super Bowl contender that can take on Buffalo, the Jets, the Dolphins, the AFC East, basically at this point, and everything else.
The good news is, and I'll leave it with this, I think you're seeing that from the defense. I mean, I think Colin Saunders is playing the best football he's played. I think when Willie Gay and Nick Bolton are right, they're really good. I think Justin Reed has brought that intelligence and intensity to the defense. L'Jarius Sneed brings it every time. Chris Jones brings it every time. You can question a lot of things about Frank Clark, but you can't question, his intensity for the most part. I mean, he's a guy who, he's going to go out there and give what he has. So I do think that the defense has that. We'll see if the offense can catch up a little bit and they can make a run to Glendale again.
I'm just concerned where this team and this roster would be at right now if Jerick McKinnon and Carlos Dunlap weren't on it. Like, where this team would be at this point. Like, those two guys are so important to this. Dunlap's really coming on strong right now and really turning it on. So,
Half sack away from 100.
So, I mean, like, him and McKinnon, man, they've been the difference maker in a couple of games. If they didn't have them, I would be concerned about where this team would be at in a couple of those tight, close games.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see when Andy faces Doug Peterson on Sunday, whether they can keep going. I think we can talk about it more later, but I would like to think that Joe Cullen has an advantage over Trevor Lawrence in this one. So
we'll see if the pattern continues or not from the schedule.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, I got nothing else. So Nick, I think it's time to bid adieu.
Yes.
All right. Take care, kids.